and welcome today to the launch of the Indo-Mediterranean Initiative. The confluence of the two seas has been a theme that has plagued Europe and India for almost 3,000 years. The Romans tried their best to see how they could unite the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean, and many stories were written about efforts to bolster trade between Rome and India by this connectivity. Trade between India and Europe is as old as empires. In ancient Roman households, Indian pepper from Kerala was very, very often found, and even today in the ruins of Pompeii, one finds evidence of trade between the two great civilizations. That said, there was another speech in 2007 which was on the confluence of two seas. It was an appeal from Shinzo Abe, the then Prime Minister of Japan, to the Indian Parliament to bring together the Indian Ocean and the Pacific so that the Indo-Pacific would guarantee security for humanity and all other trade routes. Today we meet to launch the Indo-Mediterranean Initiative. The initiative is very close to my heart, and of course nothing that we've invented today, something that's been around for a very long time. Today we'll speak about geopolitics, the India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor, and other happenings that have come to being in the past year since the Indian G20. But this is the first time India has moved into the center of the Indo-Pacific, as well as become one of the two pillars of the Indo-Mediterranean, the other being Italy. Catching up from Prime Minister Modi's visit at the G7 as an observer recently, we thought that we would take this time to reflect on the various happenings in between these two countries, and we have a wonderful panel of experts. First, I'd invite Dr. Rajiv Singh, Director General of the Indian Chamber of Commerce, to say a few words and welcome everybody. Dr. Singh.
Mr. Shinoy, thank you. First of all, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to Senator Terzi. Sir, we are really happy to see you again. Last, we had the pleasure of having you in New Delhi, and this visit was also planned around that time. And we are happy that we are here, and we'll be hearing your insights and views on how to take forward the dialogue which has been happening over past few years, and India-Italy relations have really gone to the next level. I would also like to extend, for the benefit of Indian participants, I would also like to mention that Senator Terzi plays a very important role in furthering the economic relations between India and Italy, and he is currently the president of India-Italy Parliamentary Friendship Group. I would also like to welcome Ambassador Francesco Talo, who is the Senior Advisor to Ministry of Defense, Government of Italy. Let me also welcome James Carafano. He represents the Heritage Foundation, and I will also like to welcome Mr. Kaush Arha, the President of Free and Open India Pacific Institute. All the guests from Italy and the participants and the delegation members from India. During September 2023 at the G20 summit, the India-Middle East Economic Corridor was announced. This was announced in view of the concerns which were there at that time, and they exist even now, to have free and free-flowing trade across the oceans, and to also build the synergies and to provide a very important trade route between India, GCC countries, and Europe. And of course, on the other side, connecting the US. In short, it's called IMEC, Indo-Mediterranean Economic Corridor. With this announcement, India really is at the core of this very ambitious economic corridor. And of course, it's a long-term project that requires considerable investments and continued and sustained commitment from all the partner countries. But it offers unparalleled opportunities for the countries, for the economies, and of course for the businesses. GCC, which has become one of the largest trading partners for India, after US, China, is also a part of it. And I think this really offers tremendous opportunities for the Indian companies, and that's how we are all here. The almost 37, 38 members delegation which is visiting Italy from India is really looking forward to building partnerships and to understand the opportunities which are going to emerge. The connectivity is one of the big themes because GCC has a very ambitious railways plan, and once it's in place by 2030, it really cuts down the transit time by 5 to 6 days, which is again huge. Also, it has sustainability as a very big theme. Energy, especially the renewable, is one of the big focus. And there are discussions of long distance hydrogen pipelines, of course, undersea cable for connectivity, telecom, and all that. Infrastructure connectivity definitely remains one of the big theme. So just 2 days back, Prime Minister Modi was here, 3 days back rather, and yesterday he left. He was part of G7 meeting, and it was really heartening to see the bonding between India and Italy. And I remember the Prime Minister Melanie saying that please witness the melody, which is Melanie and the Prime Minister Modi. So that really sounds very, very melodious to all of us, and I'm sure this will pave the way. Defense has emerged one of the big theme for this region. Of course, joint industrial production, energy, IT, semiconductors, textiles, leathers, jewelry, mobility. So there are plenty of things which can happen, and I'm sure people in this room, and especially the participants who have come from India, they will get very deep insights how this IMEC is going to evolve and what lies for them. With this, I once again welcome our eminent experts, guests, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Singh. I'd like to request the playing of a welcome message from Ambassador Vincenzo De Luca, the Ambassador of Italy to India, who was kind enough to send us a recorded message.
Good afternoon. A warm regard to Senatore Giulio Terzi and all the participants to this very important conference about Indo-Mediterranean collaboration and IMEC corridor. As you know, IMEC corridor was launched here in Delhi on the occasion of the summit G20 last September, and Italy, together with other European countries, United States, Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia, and Israel, joined this project that is a long-term vision of investment, connectivity between Europe and India and Middle East. Italy will play a crucial role in this corridor as a terminal to the core of the industry in Europe, Certainly ports like Trieste and also Genoa will be important entry points in Europe of this corridor, as well as Maharashtra and Mumbai will be entry point for the corridor in the subcontinent of India and neighbor countries. So our government is fully involved in support this initiative, this project, and also I hope that also private sector will present idea, proposal and project to enhance maritime connectivity and safety as well as digital connectivity. In this regard, an important project is already going on, the cable Blue Rama that will connect Italy with India through the Middle East. Will be operational first half of next year. So there will be already an important initiative and project where Italy will play an important role. But also on maritime connectivity, we can envisage further investment in the ports and also in the shipyard and also in investment in infrastructure. I think IMEC will be an important framework where we will see more and more role of European Union, Italy and Middle East in the Indo-Pacific region, and also an innovative idea of synergy between projects in the Mediterranean region and the Indian Ocean. So I'm so happy to send you this message, and I hope you all the best for the success of this conference.
Thank you, Ambassador De Luca. He is now on his way back, and in the past couple of years, he has probably been one of the biggest champions of the India-Italy relationship. To set the stage of the Indo-Mediterranean collaboration, the India-Italy economic and political partnership, we requested Sanjeev Sanyal, a member of the Economic Advisory Council of the Prime Minister of India, to give us a small background of the Indian perspective to why this has become suddenly important. Mr. Sanyal was unfortunately unable to join us in person. Again, we'll have a recorded message from him, and after which we will, I promise, pass to our speakers here. So please play us Mr. Sanyal's message. Thank you.
Hello friends, let me begin by thanking Senator Terzi for giving me this opportunity to speak to all of you today at this very important event. Let me also congratulate the Indo-Mediterranean Initiative, for which this is a key initiative as part of the India-Italy relationship, but also, of course, for promoting the IMEC effort. As you all know, the India-Middle East Europe Economic Corridor was mooted at the G20 Leaders Summit in September of 2023. And it's a very major initiative in terms of building out a new pathway for engagement between India, the Middle East, and going on to Europe. I don't need to explain to this audience the importance of it. I thought I will do a couple of things here. One is to lay out the longer history of this linkage, because I don't think people appreciate the extent to which there is a long historical precedence to it. And then talk about why this is relevant to today's world. So you see, India, Middle East, and Europe have been trading for literally thousands of years, going back to the Bronze Age. And during this period, long history, there were two routes through which these regions traded with each other. There was a northern route and there was a southern route. Now the southern route is the one you'll be more familiar with, which was that merchants and mariners and fleets would sail off from the ports of the west coast of India, and then they will sail past Aden into the Red Sea and sail up the Red Sea. Then they had two choices. Either they could dock at a port on the Egyptian side of the Red Sea, where there used to be a port called Berenike, do a short crossing by camel onto the Nile, and then sail on to Alexandria, from which, of course, they then further sailed on to various parts of the Mediterranean and Europe. Alternatively, they could go up the Gulf of Aqaba and then go through Petra on a caravan and then on to the ports of the eastern Mediterranean in Caesarea, in Sidon and Tyre and so on. And then again from there sail on to Europe. So that was the southern route with these two branches. And most of you will be familiar with this as well from history books and so on. But less celebrated is the fact that actually there was a northern route which, depending on the geopolitics of the time, was sometimes in fact more important. And this was through the Persian Gulf. So merchants from India would sail out further north and end up in the Persian Gulf, where of course they traded with the Omani people, with the people of the area that is now the UAE, with Bahrain and Qatar and so on, and then all the way through to Basra in Iraq. Now from this general area, they would then set out on camel caravans across the deserts through Damascus and so on, and then finally on to the coasts again of the eastern Mediterranean, here somewhat more north to the ones I mentioned earlier, to places like Antioch and so on. And then they would again sail out to Greece and Italy and to Constantinople and so on and so forth. Now, this northern route was, as I said, quite important in certain periods of time, and I would even argue would rival the southern route from time to time. For example, during the time of Harun al-Rashid, which is mentioned very much in the Arabian Nights, you have the stories of Sindbad, and Sindbad was using the northern route to trade with India and then trading through to the eastern Mediterranean. So there are many mentions of India in those stories, for example. So I'm just pointing this out to you because for the last 150 odd years, we have more or less thought about the southern route. This has been particularly true because of the use of the Suez Canal, which came up in the mid-19th century. And with the coming up of the Suez Canal, it became suddenly radically easier to trade through the southern route, through the Red Sea. And of course, it had the big advantage that the European colonial powers of that time controlled much of it. So the British controlled not just India, but Aden, and initially the French controlled the Suez Canal, but later on it was again the British, and then of course on to Europe again. So the southern route then became the most important route, and that is how it has been for a variety of reasons. Now the world has begun to change into the 21st century. There are now many prosperous places, just like in ancient times. There were periods when the Persian Gulf had prosperity. We today have countries like Saudi Arabia, we have countries like the UAE and so on, which are stable partners who can be a part of this IMEC effort. And so this northern route needs to be relooked at. Now, of course, the exact the alignment of the northern route has of course changed even in ancient times, depending on how things were geopolitically. And so today, given the technologies we have for railways, where the ports are, where the economic hubs are, the alignment may somewhat vary from the ancient one, but that is something that will evolve with time. What I wanted to simply bring out right in the beginning is that there is a need to reconsider this northern Persian Gulf route, which we seem to have almost given up for 150, 200 years. Now, when we are talking about creating this IMEC corridor, one may of course ask that, we do have this southern route through the Suez Canal already in existence, and I'm not proposing that that is going to disappear. That will still be a very important part of the story. However, I think there are a few things we need to learn from history. First of all, that history is genuinely unpredictable. There are all kinds of things that impact it. Of course, geopolitics is one of them, but you can have random shocks. I mean, who knew in end 2019 that the following 2 years would be lost to a pandemic called COVID? So we have to create other resilient pathways for relationships for the world economy to function. And today, of course, there are always stresses on the Red Sea route. Right now, of course, we all know about the piracy problem. There is a conflict happening in Israel, and who knows, other things could also happen. I mean, natural disasters, man-made problems, and so on. So I think there is a case, just for resilience reason, to create an alternative pathway. The second important reason is that, of course, it's not just about India and Europe trading with each other. There is Middle East, and they have a stake in this, and there are important hubs in the Middle East that are need to be part of the story. I already mentioned the UAE and Saudi Arabia, and of course there are other hubs as well, and we need to connect them through. And of course, these things may evolve in the future. So other countries which are today we don't consider to be a part of the economic machine of the Middle East may join this. In fact, part of the purpose of building this is indeed to create these linkages. So I think there is many reasons to do this. One, of course, the resilience reason for building it. Two, to connect through the new emerging economic hubs that are in the Middle East and connect them through to India on one side and to Europe on the other side. And of course, there are cost advantages, new technologies in high-speed railways, ports, and other things can be also connected through. So there are many reasons for doing this. It has got, as you know, countries along this pathway quite excited. Now I understand that at every step there will be geopolitical and other considerations, but these are long-term projects, and we need to look at them flexibly, make sure that at the key choke points we have thought through pathways that will continue to function. If resilience is the reason for having it, then we need to make sure that there are pathways that will keep functioning, and invest in this. There are large investments, as you know, that can be put into this project and have been committed to, but we need to make sure that the key nodes are first of all invested in, and because significant parts of it are maritime, there is also means that there can be a great deal of flexibility in this. It's not like we are getting stuck in some fixed lines over time, over the next 50, 100 years, and these are the kinds of time scales in which we need to think about these things. There will be other ways of doing this. So one of the things that I think we need to consider when having this conversation with IMEC is the flexibility of this what I would call the historical northern route, such that new bits can be added, how they can be arranged around, and also create hubs where others can fit themselves in, as as things may look 100 years from now, or maybe you don't have to think that long, maybe in 2-3 decades from now even. So I think, let me say that Senator Terzi, thank you once again for putting this group together. I think, as with anything, a relationship requires a trust. It requires understanding each other and understanding and having a mutual framework of reference with which to work. And I hope that by providing some historical context and also by giving you the kind of reasoning that we have for bringing this IMEC effort up, we will be able to evolve ways of dealing with what will always be, there will always be naysayers, and of course we need to also make sure that it is a flexible enough corridor that can deal with all kinds of other exigencies. So let me end by saying, congratulations once more to the Indo-Mediterranean Initiative, and let's make sure that we have another pathway for trade and economic and other relationships that can pass through this corridor, through what was historically the northern route. Thank you very much.
Our gratitude to Professor Sanyal for going through the effort of recording a message. We would have hoped that he was here. Our today's guest of honor and keynote speaker, Senator Giulio Terzi di Sant'Agata, President of the Italy-India Parliamentary Friendship Group, as well as the inspiration behind the Indo-Mediterranean Initiative. Senator.
Thank you very much, dear Vas Shenoy. Really a sincere thank for having been the initiator, the mastermind, the organizer, the way to implement this beautiful event, this great opportunity to be here to discuss such a momentous issue and in a so timely way. Just these issues were discussed, given a lot of prominence during the G7 meeting and the bilateral meetings the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister Modi, Prime Minister Meloni had. Very important, and also the other bilaterals in the outreach, but especially the core discussion in this G7 Apulia summit were very much and under many facets very much interested and relevant for the Indo-Pacific discussion we have today. So a sincere thanks to Vas, but a sincere appreciation also to Rajiv Singh, the Director General of the Chamber of Commerce, to the other very interesting and eloquent speakers who have taken the floor up to now, Sanjeev Santal, and in particular, I would like to give really a sincere welcome with the expectation that we'll meet soon in Trieste to Dr. Sandra Sodini, the representative of President Federica here in this room, and to the panelists who are attending today, notwithstanding the temperature and the day, which is not ignored by Roman and Italian people in general, but we are here because of the great interest of the discussion, and in any case, this is the overarching commitment that we have to discuss. Two American friends who are very knowledgeable on this, I say you are a force of inspiring us through what we read and what we listen to them, Dr. James Carafano and Dr. Kaush Arha, and the presence of two key players, not have been, but actual and future key players on all these issues, Ambassador Francesco Talo and Professor Francesco Gaglietti. So it is a great pleasure to have this opportunity to be in such a important company of experts on this issue. So I would like to pass just a few remarks on describing where we stand, what has been the road which brought us here, and the expectation that we, in the sense in Parliament and in the government, but Francesco Talo is much more knowledgeable, having been the mind and the top diplomat in moving this dynamic to where we stand now. So I'd like to start saying that President Meloni, since President Meloni took office in October 2022, it became self-evident the great importance and attention reserved to India by the new Italian government. Think about the Italy-India strategic partnership, launched during President Meloni's visit to Delhi at the beginning of March 2023. Only a couple of days ago, as I just hinted, a couple of days ago, Prime Minister Modi attended the G7 summit in Apulia, invited by President Meloni. They reviewed progress in implementing the bilateral strategic partnership, and you know very well the rich content and the substantive value of this partnership. Really a step ahead of what it was up to then, up to definition of this and the launching of this strategic partnership. Just for example, in global energy, we were Prime Minister Modi and President Meloni, but Italy was among the first subscriber, and I think the first one, but Francesco knows better than I do. They're launching the Global Biofuel Alliance. You know very much in green energy in the transition, how important it is for Italy and for India, the biofuel dimension. But also focus on cooperation on a number of wide array of projects, from defense to infrastructure developments, to space programs, to technologies in digital transition, cybersecurity, protection of industrial property. There's to say, a very significant cooperation also in the framework of strategic partnership, cooperation reserved to mobility and migration. Another aspect that enters in the Italian politics very prominently, we made a great steps within the European Union and also the G7 in having the recognition of the basic vision that our countries must have in dealing with legal migration and in fighting against the criminal organization which are exploiting migrants. That is a clear vision and common vision that we have with India, as we have with other G7 partners, other European partners. And again, in their bilateral meeting, Prime Ministers Modi and Meloni agreed to press ahead on all this cooperation in all global forums with multilateral initiatives, and include particularly those aimed at global and regional connectivity. And in particular, and here we are in the middle of the issue, the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, IMEC, for which Italy, again, also that has been a very first signatories. And again, our two prime ministers have called, more in general terms, a number of occasions you may have noticed. It was not just consideration in general terms on where we stand, but the basic concept of relations in the international community. The fact that there is a widespread narrative, the West and the rest, the West and the global South. Well, this is something that is not particularly welcome to Italian ears, at least to the ears of Prime Minister Meloni and in the political groups which belong to parliamentary majority, because you like very much to understand that there is a need to concentrate ourselves on promoting vision which don't split regions and the world concept, the global South, the industrialized country. We are on the same planet, the same humanity, the same values of respect of human dignity and human rights, the rule of law. That, of course, connects more deeply and closely two great democracies, like greatest democracy in many senses, demographic, but not only, but for tradition, for cultural roots, and so on, which is India, and also, without being self-complacent, Italy as a very, very important democracy in sense of values for its history and its general cultural and philosophical upbringings. I would say we would have all interest to concentrate ourselves on promoting mutual security, sustainable development, freedom, human dignity, on the basis of a concept of relations among equals. That is why I'm a little reserved on splitting the world under north, south, east, or west. A relations among equals. that was proved by the number of outreach meetings that at the G7 were taken. Talking about the kind of work that we are doing, we are pursuing, the kind of input that we are giving at the parliamentary level to our group of friendship. This is happening both in terms of soft and hard power, through bilateral and multilateral cooperation, starting from big ones, and such as at the governmental level, defense cooperation, security, counterterrorism, but also, and there was mentioned, parliamentary activity, especially focusing on cultural, scientific, human ties, and human relations. And there is no doubt that before going into today's topic again, the IMEC corridor and the connection with the Mediterranean Sea and the Indo-Pacific as a bridge for Italy's role in the new scenarios, I would like to mention here, because this has been really one of the elements of this forum, coming up to the preparation of this forum, the work of the India-Italy Parliamentary Friendship Group. There are many similarities between Italian and Indian history, and that has surfaced in the discussion that we have in this interparliamentary group. It has served a first time at the Rasina dialogue attended by President Meloni in 2023. Francesco Talo was there and was really did a great job on that occasion. And it serves again in the activity, the cultural activity in commemoration of dedicated to the 75th anniversary of Italy-India bilateral relations, when we presented a book at the Senate on the embassy, on the Italian embassy in India. And by the way, I would like to recognize also participation tonight, but also the expectation that we have for Ambassador De Luca, the splendid job that he did in his mission, is going to be accomplished and to come to a term in the next few days. But we'll have the pleasure to, we have had the pleasure today of listening to him, the important message that he sent, and also I expect to listen to him tomorrow at another event we are going to have at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs club tomorrow evening. But it is the India-Italy Parliamentary Friendship Group that has organized, besides this presentation and this event on the 75th anniversary, several moments of discussion, often in collaboration with the Embassy of India in Italy and the Chamber of Commerce that today host us. And let me express again a deep appreciation to the Embassy of India, to Her Excellency Vani Rao. I know that she is very supportive of this forum, and she is doing an excellent and extraordinary beginning of mission to follow up in line exactly for what has been done by the embassy in a previous season led by Ambassador Malhotra. The friendship group comprises members which are also involved in a more direct promotion of soft power, and I would like to recognize the role of Honorable Mollicone, Chairman of the Culture Commission in the Chamber of Deputies, and the important mission that he had the opportunity to make to the Kerala region to attend the International Conference of the Soft Power Club. And again, we had the honor at the Senate of having an in-depth talk about bilateral cooperation with Ambassador Vani Rao, and a talk attended by a good number of members and a prominent group of members of the Italy-India Interparliamentary Friendship Group. Well, I am mentioning all this because it is quite important There are many other things that I could say, like my presence at Resina Dialogue a few months ago, the extremely interesting meeting with Foreign Minister Jai Shankar, whom I would like to congratulate wholeheartedly for his appointment in the new cabinet. But I think that I cannot go too far and to take too much of your time in reporting to you what we are doing. But it was just doing that just to show concretely why there is so much concentration on the question of IMEC, and why we are talking so often and so intensely, but we are not only talking, we would like to act, as I was discussing Dr. Arha and Dr. Carafano just a few minutes ago. We have to act fast on defining the reasons why the corridor is so important and why Trieste must be considered really at the center of this initiative. The strength of a two-way corridor from India to Europe and vice versa lies in the creation of an alternative route to other initiatives which are already in the cards from other powers. The corridor is planned to guarantee the future of trade, energy, and data links between India, Europe, and the Middle East in the Atlantic Alliance's growth. It is a matter of security and independence of our global economy, established by treaties and norms of the international order. In fact, it is perfectly embedded in the EU Global Gateway as well as in the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment, and also in the Matteis plan of Meloni's government. Matteis plan refers to Africa especially, but Africa has a clear dimension in the Indo-Pacific when we look at the geopolitical situation of the African continent. So that's why these three elements, PGII, Matteis plan, and IMEC, have entered repeatedly in the final communique of the G7. And that all things stand together. And the vision, as I try to present, is really a vision which encompasses a number of factors, which is moving fast and responds to general but coincident security and political objectives. And that is because today, more than ever, India and Italy share the common vision for a free and open Indo-Pacific, where the international law is recognized and fully implemented, must be fully recognized and implemented, based on respect of the national sovereignty, on security, and the prerogatives of each state, as provided by bilateral and multilateral treaties, starting with the UN Charter, and I underline this aspect, and others such as the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, with its norm and obligations concerning the strict respect of freedom of navigation, sovereignty, exploration rights in territorial waters, and the free economic zones that are foreseen by the Convention. Italy and India share, I believe, exactly this vision of an Indo-Pacific which is in many aspects a natural continuation of an enlarged Mediterranean that has always been at the heart of the Italian foreign policy. An enlarged Mediterranean that has even more taken importance and centrality with Prime Minister Meloni's government. The war in Ukraine today is at a critical stage and complicates the whole even more. There is no need to delve into insights into the relationship between President Putin and President Xi Jinping, or into Iranian aspiration in the Middle East region, or again into the global order powers like they would like to impose on us. In this complexity, IMEC represents a real security axis, not just an economic corridor. Moreover, IMEC means a concrete, tangible integration of the Indo-Pacific region within Europe and within the West, in the precise perspective of the enlarged Mediterranean concept. And they come again now to the Italian role with this government, with President Meloni's government. The government has taken up the challenge of being at the forefront in forging new rules and supply chains, from putting Africa at the center of our foreign agenda with the Mattei Plan, and choose to enhance the national maritime predisposition of our peninsula. Indo-Pacific integration with Europe is, of course, closely linked to European integration with the African continent. A huge opportunity is emerging from our nations to be bridges, both of us, between Africa and the EU, on a route between the Indo-Pacific and the Mediterranean. The EU has already recognized the strategic nature of this new paradigm, since the Mattei Plan, for instance, is one of the 15 strategic development programs that are recognized as priority by the European Union. And I think that I was referring before by Dr. Kaush, whom I again greatly, and Dr. Carlos Roa, co-author with Dr. Kaush, in a recent brilliant article in the National Interest magazine, that countries such as Japan might also be interested in signing up to an initiative of such profound strategic implication. There is no need of a pivot or concentration of efforts on a specific area. And here I could quote Professor James Carafano words, and the quote, "There is no point in going back to thinking about blocks of influence. We need to create global opportunities for countries willing to forge solid and free ties, to build interdependence that benefits everyone without using anymore an us versus them mentality. And Italy, in this playground, plays as a crucial role as a natural terminal," end of quote. You see here the reason why at the beginning I was saying that we should not split the different geographic zone according to different principles, rules, or interpretation of universal rights. It is a mentality of not us versus them, but is an inclusive mentality of inclusion. And thank you, Dr. Carafano, for being so eloquent on this matter. He looked at me as if saying, "Don't spoil my writing," but I end here, not to do too much of that. And IMEC in particular. Let's go back to the Adriatic Sea and Trieste. Long history, enormous, huge history, huge wealth, the history of Venice. The region of Venice, and therefore Veneto, Friuli, Venezia Giulia, but also the Mediterranean, the opening up to the Mediterranean basin and beyond. But historically, especially the Venetian Republic. But nowadays, really a great opportunity to come back to a crucial node for trade, cultural exchanges, and for a vibrant political and economic human relations picture. It seems clear to me that nowadays there is no better option than Trieste to play the key role in the whole Mediterranean basin until the Adriatic, since the Adriatic is the key of the most important platform for interconnecting the 4 strategic corridors in Europe. The 4 strategic corridors, the Mediterranean, Rhine-Alps, Scandinavian Mediterranean, and Baltic Adriatics. And Trieste is right there, is the central pillar in all these intersections. It is not only because already trade is, for instance, very, very fluent and important. 70% of goods directed from Turkey to Europe go through Trieste. I could say similar, you could give similar figures also from other points of derivation of imports. But Trieste is really, in the sense, if you look in that sense of interconnection, but also from the prominence that is taking also as a city, as a harbor, as an industrial hub, high-tech hub, at the heart of Europe in industrial and EU trade routes, perfectly connected by rail to Austria, Hungary, Germany, Slovakia, Czech Republic, and also potential development of the 3 Seas initiatives, the 3SI, connecting Baltic, Black, and the Adriatic Seas. And this I'm stealing some ideas from my red side, I think Professor Gaglietti, but Professor Kaush, we have spoken a number of times about that. At the local and regional level, IMEC represents an important opportunity, therefore, for Italy's Northeast industrial hub, especially for the whole Veneto and Friuli Venezia Giulia regions, and at the same time for the entire European community. And therefore, it is essential that there will be cross-sector support for this initiative. And I think it is our task in our forum today, and the people not only in this room, but also to try to study the situation and to fast generate a momentum for this idea of moving IMEC in the direction of Trieste and connecting to the 4 main European corridors. And that is because European international politics are intertwined. Considering recent EU elections, we can only welcome the accrued responsibilities that this Italian government and the parliamentary majority supporting it are willing to take with the European vision of economic and social progress, of an European enhanced integration as far as connectivity and infrastructure are concerned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Terzi. With those inspiring words, I'd now like to turn the mic to Ambassador Francesco Talo, who, despite his current designation, was there when it all happened. He was in Delhi when Prime Minister Meloni was visiting in March, as well as for G20, and he was the guy who made it all happen. So, Ambassador Talo.
Thank you so much for organizing this event and inviting me. And I'm really very happy that despite the challenges of a warm, let's say, hot afternoon, Sunday afternoon in Rome, we are here in a very meaningful place. And really, I think that the location it's an important aspect of our meeting. But of course, what is more important is the people you are convening here. And so I'm very grateful to the Chamber of Commerce, the Indian Chamber of Commerce, who has its vision of being a real bridge between our 2 countries for the benefits of our people, of our economies, and of course of the rest of the world, because when you build bridges, it's good for all. And we had very important, interesting introductions and speeches. I was very struck by the words we had from Delhi about the historical roots of our projects for the future. So this is to underline how much history and geography are the basis of our future. Geography, first of all, with its permanent nature, which dictates somehow the dynamism of history. So there are these 2 factors, this dialectic between the permanent nature of geography, which doesn't change very much. A little bit, yes, for instance, with the opening of the Suez Canal, and history, which is continuously changing, but has somehow some interesting schemes and repetitions, which is worthwhile to study. And here we are in next to the Arha patches, to such a meaningful monument of Emperor Augustus, who after quite, let's say, a turbulent time in Roman history, in the Mediterranean history, was able to have eventually peace on our part of the world. And this is somehow very much connected on the issues we are discussing now, because this peace was reached after battles and confrontations, especially in the Eastern Mediterranean. And eventually, the arrival point was the real creation of a Mediterranean community, of what we call the Mare Nostrum, with the end of the Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt, so the end of what is somehow was the follow-up of the Alexandrian creation of an empire between Europe and India. At that time, let's say the part of the world which was creating and developing its own history was ranging exactly from the Mediterranean to India. So the Emperor Augustus received a delegation of a diplomatic delegation from a kingdom of southern India in Antioch. And so there was, we can say this, there was an Indo-Mediterranean community built on great cultures, with India as a great economic and political powerhouse, and on the other hand, the Roman Empire. World history was not one. We knew about the existence of a Chinese important culture, civilization, power, but it was somehow a parallel history. And what happened on the Western Hemisphere was ignored. There was history, of course, in the Americas, but it was developing in a parallel way. This is to say that there was a time when an Indo-Mediterranean economy and somehow political history was developing. Then we moved to a global history from the time of navigation with the big discoveries, etc. It is time again now to underline the importance of thinking globally, because everything is clearly connected. And this is actually the introduction of the long conclusions, actually. It's 36 pages of the G7 summit. It starts underlying, and they start underlying the fact that we are facing multiple crises which are interconnected. So we have to think globally. And I like to speak about a 360 degrees approach, a global 360 degrees. So Ambassador and Senator Terzi is my mentor, is someone who really has been an example for me. And he knows very well how important it has been for us within NATO, for instance, to insist and to reach eventually consensus on the notion of security at 360 degrees. But this was somehow within the Euro-Mediterranean or the Euro-Atlantic sphere. So it meant we have to think that there is not only an eastern flank, but also a southern one. And so we have to think 360 degrees. Now it's time to think 360 degrees globally. It means that while today our leaders are in Switzerland dealing with the consequences of the Russian aggression to Ukraine, this has consequences not only on Europe or on the Euro-Atlantic community, but all over the world. And this is why so many nations are so much concerned about this terrible aggression against the international law, which goes especially against smaller and weaker countries, wherever they are. And the consequences will be and are already in the Far East. And they will be strong if we are not perseverant everywhere in the Indo-Pacific and in Africa. So everything is connected. And when we have common interests, when we have common values, we have to work together. And this is why and how we worked during last year with 2 visits of President Meloni in India after a too long time of not very strong relations which are certainly under the potential between our 2 countries. So Prime Minister Meloni went to India beginning of March last year. An agreement on strategic partnership was concluded. Many other agreements which have been now remembered by Senator Terzi have been launched. And she made, I think, an important speech at the opening of the Raisina dialogue last year. Then she came back for the G20 summit in September. And we launched together the IMEC corridor. I think that this is part of what we should really call an Indo-Mediterranean vision. And I insist on this geopolitical and geostrategical term, Indo-Mediterranean, because this is consistent with the other success story of Indo-Pacific. So Prime Minister Abe in 2016 had this vision to insist on something which is certainly consistent with a maritime country, an insular country like Japan. And he was able to substitute the Asia-Pacific concept with Indo-Pacific. So a vision which had a more continental approach, Asia-Pacific, to a maritime vision, Indo-Pacific. And this is, of course, convenient for countries like India and Italy, which are very much maritime countries, which are peninsula with mountains on the top. And so they have to look on the seas, on the oceans, to develop their trades. And this happened already thousands of years ago. As we listened, there were 2 routes, but both routes started from the harbors of India. Much less from the mountains of India. So this is something convenient for us. It's important to do this and to start speaking about Indo-Pacific as, let's say, another ring of a chain which starts with the Indo-Pacific. And then, of course, we have the Mediterranean Sea as a real sea in the middle, like its name says. Mediterranean is the sea of the middle. It used to be like this always. In the middle between 3 continents, Asia, Africa, and Europe. And now, in the middle between the 2 largest world basins, the Atlantic and the Indo-Pacific. So it's a small sea, which is, I think, less than 1% of all the waters of the planet. But the percentage of trade which arrives on the Mediterranean is disproportionate. It is 10 times or more larger. And of course, it's part of a common culture of really a great terminal of international trade and, of course, important political and also security powers. We can work together, and IMEC is much more than a corridor, and it's important to adopt what has been now underlined, a flexible approach. It's really somehow part of a great stream of with many possibilities of connections. One of them certainly today is digital connectivity, being, of course, the fuel of today's economy, data. And we are very proud that Sparkle, which is an Italian company of Team Telecom, is the protagonist of the connection with data between Asia and Europe. So data from India with the Blue Raman project are traveling to Europe through the Middle East and then the Mediterranean and Sicily and northern Italy and northern Europe. So Italy is really the bridge between Africa and Europe, the bridge between Asia and Europe. And of course, in the middle, we have this Mediterranean Sea, and Italy has the northernmost harbors in the Mediterranean. The one which is much more at the north is Trieste, with a city which is very much a Central European city, by culture, by economy, and it's obviously the Mediterranean harbor for the big economic powerhouses of Europe. First of all, Germany. So for Germany is the most convenient port, and of course with Germany, I think to Austria, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, they have been mentioned by Senator Terzi now. So this is the most convenient route. This is the obvious terminal for IMEC, not excluding possible other Italian harbors, but certainly Italy, for the size of its economy, for its infrastructures, for its geographical location, is the terminal for IMEC. I was very happy to be there, and I have to say proud, and I really felt something special when I was there in Delhi in September last year for the signature of this important initiative, IMEC. And it's important that we can put this in the framework of an international activity. And I'm very proud that I played a small part in this year of activities, which has seen Italy being a protagonist in the rebirth, or better, the great development of relations, not only with India, but also, and this is linked also with IMEC, with the United Arab Emirates. In fact, immediately after the visit in Delhi in March last year, we went to Abu Dhabi, and now a very strong relationship has been created between Prime Minister Meloni and the President of the Emirates. And then also we kept and developed a strong relation with Qatar. And of course, we cannot ignore the importance of the relation with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and the hope that one day all this will be part of a peaceful Middle East, let's say a startup region. No more, we should no more speak about the startup nation, which is Israel, of course, great friends of Italy, but a startup region, having together all the countries of the regions for the benefit of all the peoples, including the Palestinian people of this region. So I think that if we speak about Indo-Mediterranean, it's all about this, and one should speak much more about this concept rather than enlarged Mediterranean, which is let's say, the traditional way in Italy to think about this, with its connectivity, with these links with Africa. And at that time already, at the time of Emperor Augustus, both India and Italy, for instance, had an important relationship with the rulers of Yemen, and on the other side of the Gulf of Aden, of Ethiopia, the Kingdom of Aksum. So there is a long history, and there is especially a very important future for a project which it's important also because all the protagonists are on the same level. So there is not a leading country. It's not like other projects which are labeled like the project of the X country for the main interest of a specific country. This is a project for all, with the possible extensions to many others. Japan has been mentioned, and I think the potential is big for having also countries from the Far East be interested to this. Southeast Asian countries can benefit of this, and the same, of course, is for the rest of Europe. I think Germany, first of all, of course, but also for Africa. And the Mattei plan is being also mentioned. What we have to do now, I think we have to do some homework in Italy, and I know that in the parliament there is a proposal to have a special envoy in Italy, like there is also already in France, dedicated to this project. I think it's a good idea. We have to work together, maybe to meet again in Trieste soon, to insist on this project, on specific aspects of it, and affirming the role of the Indo-Mediterranean and the Italian harbors in this. So I thank you again for all this. It's very nice to be with my great teacher, and then, of course, speaking about teachers and academy, professor from the Lewis University. And important is to have two scholars from the US, very close to India and to Italy, also at this table. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Talo. The Indo-Mediterranean has one big ally, the United States of America, which does not show up in IMEC. It is India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, but without the US, it probably wouldn't be possible. I invite Dr. Carafano from the Heritage Foundation to say a few words from the US perspective.
Thank you. So it may be a hot, muggy day in Rome, but if you were in Delhi or Washington, D.C., it would be a cool, breezy summer afternoon. So, look, I should be right in the middle of an Italian-Indian dialogue. First of all, mia familia italiano, but more importantly, from an American perspective, we look at the leader of Italy as the European leader with the strongest vision for the future prosperity, security, and freedom of Europe. And for an America which is committed to the transatlantic relationships, that partnership, that vision is really important to us. You know, from the other perspective, I spent a lot of time in Italy over the last 20 years. The Heritage Foundation has been one of the strongest think tanks working on the bilateral partnership. For the reason is the American Indian strategic partnership is one of the most important relationships in the world, and to be one of the defining relationships in the decades ahead. I just want to make 3 points, because I'd like to bring an American perspective about why does the United States care about any of this. So when you listen to the debate about what U.S. foreign policy should be, and Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, you hear it's between the isolationists, which want to sit at home and do nothing, and the internationalists, which want to sit in the UN and do nothing. And the reality is neither one of those is going to be America's foreign policy. It's just not. It's just stupid to even listen to the argument. The reality is the United States is a global power with global responsibilities and global interests, and that's just not going to change. And we have to deal with that. So the question is, what is the best way to deal with that? All right, so we know that this idea of great power competition is not going anywhere. From an American perspective, we're always going to be most concerned about the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians. We're never going to make friends. This is going to go on for decades, in part because they have no interest in America being their friend. But this raises the real question is, what do you do about the rest of the world? So, the old idea is that we just divide up into, a big blue sphere over here and a big red sphere. That's nonsense. We're not going to go back to competing that way. And it doesn't work. So from the American perspective, what is best? The more we link the free and open spaces of the world together, the more we create stability, prosperity, and opportunity for others, the less area there is for people to compete. And that really is in the best interest of the United States. So when we talk about what should a future American foreign policy be, because we are in search of one, whether it's Republican or Democrat, the focus of that really should be about what can we do to positively contribute to the linkage of free and open spaces together. And so what I really try to encourage in the United States is to say, don't look at, here's a 3Cs initiative or here's the IMEC. Look at what happens if all these projects are successful and if you can link all of them together. So we would like to see a 3Cs, which links the northern, central, and southern Europe backbone of Europe, a huge market of 100 million people, enormous future prosperity and economic growth, links that together. Then you have a free and open Black Sea, which really is a pivot point that connects you to an emerging middle corridor, which I think is no really any longer about linking China to the West. It's really about linking the Caucasus and Central Asia and the energy, digital connectivity, resources, and what they can bring and connect to global markets. And then IMEC is essential because if you look at the future growth that India is going to bring to the table, plus Korea and Japan and Taiwan, we need to at least triple the throughput to the region. And you can never do that with the Suez Canal alone. And so this is going to be the great corridor that links the great free and open nations of Japan and Korea and India to the global markets in the West. And once you go through IMEC, then there's also the potential, because that's the real way we're going to bring Central Asia and the Caucasus into linking with Asian markets. It's not going to be north-south politics. That's never going to work out. So India and others are going to go through IMEC into the Med, and then one option will be to go into the Black Sea, into Europe, but also to cross over into the middle corridor. And the other thing that we don't talk about enough, but these guys do because they're really smart, is when you link all those things together, the economic productivity you bring is going to create all new possibilities as a foundation for engaging with North Africa in particular and East Africa. And this could be the transformative, the real transformer to create true partnerships and also bring a level of stability and prosperity to Africa. So as an American, I would like to see all these projects succeed. And for a future American government, I would like to see all these projects flourish. So I'll just end on the third point, which is what would we like to see from Italy and India? And I'll talk just a bit about security and a bit about economics. On the security front, let's assume that IMEC is going to work, because I think it will. I think the marketplace will drive that, because the need for that throughput in the region is just going to be, the demand is going to be so significant in the future. And the need for resilient and redundant supply chains, I think, has been so eminently demonstrated. This is going to happen. So what do we need to do to leverage that success? Well, the number one thing I would say from a security standpoint is we would love to see an India that has a more robust and aggressive naval capability in ensuring a free and open Indian Ocean stretching from the Bay of Bengal to the Red Sea. From an economic standpoint, what we need to start to do is to bring not just India, but the great economic engines of Asia into partnerships to get that synergy. So not just the Indians engaging in new economic partnerships, but the Indians and the Koreans and the Japanese coming in together, in particular in East Africa, which will benefit greatly from this connectivity and creates real opportunities, and Central and Southern Europe. What do we want from Italy? Well, from a security perspective, I think there's two real partnerships where Italy can be a real leader with the United States and with other like-minded European countries. One is, it's really time for Italy to lead in getting Greece and Cyprus and Turkey into a long-term cooperative relationship in the Mediterranean. Because whether we like it or not, Turkey is going to be a key player in the development of the Middle Corridor and the development of IMEC. And having that kind of cross-Mediterranean partnership now, I think, is really more essential than ever. The other real security economic cooperation is in dealing with North Africa, where, look, the reality is the United States has never have the capacity and capability to really tip things in Africa. And our Asian partners who care, India, Japan, Korea, they're not either. And European countries aren't. But if we were all actually working in a relatively cooperative manner, we could really make a difference in different places. And so we really need Italy to be the engine to kind of bring together the kind of partnerships that are starting to make a difference in North Africa on both the security and economic front. And the last thing I'll say is Italy should also be the light that is linking the Middle Corridor and the Three Seas Initiative, which will greatly benefit particularly the Italian ports. The Prime Minister of Italy should go to Trieste, and she should give a speech as historic as the speech she gave in Ricina. No European leader ever went to Asia and gave a compelling, powerful vision for why connecting Europe and a free and open Indo-Pacific would benefit tremendously both places. And a European leader needs to go to Trieste and make the same speech about when you tie in the Three Seas Initiative and the Middle Corridor together, how that is going to add, that is really going to put the Mediterranean in the center of global markets. And I love the history lesson, right? Because with the history, for most of human history, these have been the natural corridors to connect the world together. And it was really only disrupted by World War I and World War II and the post-Cold War era. The notion that this can't happen, this has to happen again because the geography demands it. And I'll just end on this if I can. I just want to say this one thing. And if you don't pay attention or remember anything else that happens today, you should remember this. These are very, very different people. Different backgrounds, most of them who I didn't even know 2 years ago. And we all came here today, whether on video or live, and bored you by saying almost the same things. These people from 3 different continents showed up in one place and agreed on almost anything. I can't get 3 people from Jersey to show up in one place and agree on something. Edison didn't invent the light bulb or electricity. There was a moment when a lot of people recognized the common sense vision of where the world was going. And then some great people saw that and then took advantage of that and transformed the world. We are telling you that men of common and women of common sense, we see the future and where this is going. You have the opportunity to grasp this and be the transformers and exploit this vision because it's really going to happen. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today to talk about it. So
Jim, thank you so much. One of the reasons why this initiative actually took shape was because Senator Terzi and I were able to meet with Jim and Kaush in Delhi at the margins of Ricina Dialogues, and that's where these things started getting cooked fairly better. After a very practical American perspective, I'd talk to my friend Professor Gaglietti for an academic one. So, Francesco, very practical.
I'm as practical as it gets. I have three items too on my agenda. The first one is an historical one, the second is an economic one, the third one is geopolitical. So I'll start with the historical one. I think by now it's very clear, it's become very clear that what used to be a Venetian trading scheme is back. The Venetians were traumatized when the Suez Canal was built. For them, it was the beginning of the end. Because, of course, if we look at the history of the Venetian Merchant Republic, you can see clearly that they had a love-hate relationship with the Ottoman Empire. And at times they even had built a cartel for trade with India. Okay, and that, by the way, that's one of the reasons why Columbus eventually discovered America. So the Venetians did not like the Suez Canal, and it was just very late in the process, in the 19th century, when you saw the great engineering minds of Venice deploying in Suez, like Pietro Paleocapa and the others. But again, like, they dragged their heels as long as they could. And now that scheme, which is a hybrid scheme, part water, part railways, is back. So I'm very curious to see. Clearly today we have reps from Trieste here, not from Venice. And so let's see how this plays out this time. Another historical item is that when we look at connectivity and big connectivity strategies historically, there was one empire that basically disrupted all these plans. It was the British Empire. If you travel to the Levant, if you go to Jordan, if you go to the Gulf, if you watch a Lawrence of Arabia movie, you will see that guerrilla warfare, Arab nationalism, it was all the making of the British Empire to sabotage connectivity, the German-Ottoman connectivity. Right? Lawrence of Arabia is the brainchild of the British Empire, and he was there to sabotage the Berlin-Baghdad ban, which was back then a large infrastructure connectivity plan. Okay, so back in the days, all these connectivity plans failed because they had one big enemy, British hostility. Clearly, we have swapped empire. Now, like the big one is the US one. And let's just say, we just heard it from James, there is no such hostility at all, at least now. There is an encouragement, there is a real push towards connectivity. IMEC could not be brought about without a very strong support from Washington. And as you heard, it's not just IMEC, it's IMEC plus 3SI and whatever other connectivity platforms exist around. So it's clear that the new Anglo mood is benign and not hostile. It's clear that some of these platforms not only are tolerated, accepted by the US, but they're even incentivized by the US. But I'm old enough to remember a time when the US had a completely different pattern. Like, if I go back in time to the Obama years, for instance, but even before that, the US was at the center, and it was the only power able to play the Pacific card and the Atlantic card, and like the two were kept separate. Okay. There was no direct contact between the Atlantic and the Pacific. Whereas what we're seeing now is that we have big players in the Pacific reaching out directly to, say, Europe, like Japan. Japan and Europe have now a big free trade agreement in place, and I hope that we're going to see something as deep and as intense with India as soon as possible. Okay, so like, things are changing. This butterfly scheme with an eagle spreading its two wings and the only animal allowed to do that, now that's gone. Forget about it. So much for the historical perspective. The economic factor at play is simply described. Like, Italy is if you look at the numbers, at the figures, they're not very encouraging. Like, I think Italy's GDP growth is below 1%, which pales in comparison with India. But whatever momentum is left, it's entirely driven by export. Italy is an export-driven economic powerhouse. And so and I think that slowly but steadily it's coming to realize that China is not going to be what it used to be. There's going to be de-risking, decoupling. It's going to be painful. And from an Italian perspective, you need to replace whatever you were doing before with a new market that is sufficiently prosperous, big, and has a growth potential. And that it's pretty obvious that India matches all these characteristics. And so, and it's not just Italy, of course, having this type of reflections, it's Germany as well, and all of Europe, basically. You can see that there is an effort to open up the American market. It's not too simple, and that there is a parallel effort to open up other markets. India is very, very promising. The third element, which I'm not sure anyone has mentioned today, is that the feasibility of IMEC hinges entirely on the stability of the Gulf. You cannot have IMEC without the Abraham deal, the Abraham Pact. Okay, so you need to pacify and stabilize a very broad region. Okay, so we have to travel back in time to the days of the Abraham deal, which basically means that the monarchies of the Gulf accept to normalize the relationship with Israel in return for security vis-a-vis Iran. So I put it very brutally, but I think at the heart of the deal is what I just mentioned. And IMEC builds on that. Okay, so it accepts that the entire area is more or less stable, and because of that, thanks to that stability, you can leapfrog from the Indian Ocean into the Mediterranean. So, but like, again, this is no minor detail, because we know that there have been centuries of wars and frictions and all sorts of issues in that specific area. And of course, there are some players like Turkey, which we have to deal with one way or the other, who may want a piece of the action. They want to be included and not excluded. If they are excluded, they will react. And we've learned the hard way what that means in the Mediterranean. So, like, it's really, to me, it's these three areas. The historical one, which is, I mean, you can't really understand these phenomena because if we don't embrace an historical perspective. Economic, that's very simple and straightforward. And the third one, geopolitics, is what probably is the most complicated one, because we are assuming something that is incredibly difficult to us to take for granted, which is stability in the Gulf and normalization of relationships. Let's see. Anyway, thank you so much for the opportunity to discuss this.
Thank you so much, Professor Gaglietti. I have never understood how correctly to introduce Professor Kaush Arha, so I'm not going to try. I'm going to ask him to introduce himself and kindly conclude this session. Please do.
Well, thanks a lot. My jet lag is kicking in, so I think I better stand. It'd be kind of embarrassing to sleep while you're talking. Let me build off of something that my good friend Jim Carafano said. Since he said everything I was going to say, I need to come up with something new. I'm going to posit to you 5 things, and it's important to say what these 5 things are and how does Italy play. And I'll start by saying that for all the reason Jim and all the other colleagues mentioned the point, history is literally knocking on the doors for India and Italy to play a world-defining role. And I mentioned why. The question really is whether these 2 countries will respond to this. And whether they respond to this depends literally in a very fascinating and complex interplay of economics and politics. And we'll see how they come into play today. And while I'm talking about it, the key theme, which I think Jim mentioned in linking free and open spaces, I want to keep in mind inclusivity. Do not be chasing rabbits and red herrings. 150 people come and say all these reasons why this is not going to happen. My good colleague, I think we're going to have 90% agreement, so I'm not going to spend the 10% that my colleague said about either how Saudi Arabia and West Asia look or everything that was wrong in Middle East started by the British Empire. Both of them I disagree with, but neither here nor there. We're going to focus on the 90% that we do agree on. First and foremost is the fact that the economic gravitational pull of a rising India, a rising West Asia, and Europe are just going to pull them together. If there was IMEC or no IMEC, if we had the Indo-Mediterranean dialogue or not, the fundamental element is if India is going to be growing at 7 to 8% or 6 to 8% for 10 years, and if it's going to become the third largest economy of the world, it's just going to be trading a hell of a lot more with Europe, period, without any other names or not. That West Asia, that one of the main things that has been lost out, that because of the sanctions on Russia, the biggest beneficiary have been the Gulf nations and their oil and gas money. So they were already rich, and they're really, really, really rich with a lot of money, not knowing where to spend, with a definite desire to diversify their economies away from natural gas and become trading and financial hubs in this land, which my good friend Ambassador Talo mentioned of how Indo-Pacific and Indo-Mediterranean hooks up. That's just going to do this on their own, whether we have this discussion or we don't have this discussion. And Europe, who has been in love with China, just discovered it 20 years ago, and then everything rode left to China with good friends, Germany and Volkswagen and BSF and everything else. They have now found out that, by golly, we need a different market and different source. It can't just be China. And the largest growing economies and the fastest growing economies of the world happen to be in the Indo-Pacific region. So I like my good friend Torino says Pacific's coming to Europe. No, it's Europe's going to be going to the Pacific, just like Europe was going to Pacific throughout most of the history. So when we talked a lot about the historical aspect of this, was a fundamental element that was driving it. All you good fellows coming over from India, namaskar, thank you, dhanyavad, very good to be here. For the first 15 years of the world, India was about 20 to 30% of global GDP. That's why it drove the trade that you're talking about. Everybody wanted to trade with it. That's why all these lanes, the north and the south, and by the time you're done with it, you'll figure out that there's at least 15 southern routes and not at least 12 northern routes, depending on who's talking about it. So this economic convergence is going to happen, period. The question within that case is that it is pretty common that maybe Mumbai will be the main port driving this from the Indian side. Yes, Madras, Rajkot, Jamnagar, all of these will play a role, but Mumbai will be driving it. Yes, Dubai will play a very important role in West Asia. I think it'll be fantastic that other ports come up, whether it be Haifa or Saudi Arabia, but Dubai will play an important role. We don't know which dang port out in Europe is going to be the main port driving it. Is it going to be Piraeus? Is it going to be Trieste? Is it going to be Marseille? Is it going to be Constanza? Is it be Istanbul? It's an open book. You got to decide which one it's going to be. We'll talk about that a little bit. So these economic gravitational forces is going to happen. That's point number one. Now, I think when we talk about IMEC, and again, Ambassador Talo mentioned it kind of in the right way, to look at it in a broader perspective of Indo-Mediterranean initiative with multiple rivers of commerce going. And I'm back to inclusivity. We're not just focused on that, because if you just focus on IMEC, a corridor, make it too literal, then we'll be spending 90% of the time, as my colleague was saying, will depend on what's going to happen between the Saudi Arabia and with Israel and UAE. That's absolutely right. But as a good friend from India said, hey, there's a line that goes up Persian Gulf, there's a line that goes up Red Sea, Turks want to go up Basra to Baghdad, somebody else, couldn't care less, more the merrier. That's a symbolic element that these are going to happen. And where it's happening the most right now is Suez Canal. So all these are aspirational stuff, which is happening today, and the main driver is Suez. So this IMAC should be used both in a symbolic and in a specific infrastructure project, not only a specific infrastructure project, because economic gravitational forces are going to pull. That's one thing. So while this is happening towards east, another fascinating thing, this is point number 2, happening towards the north and central that Jim talked about. The fastest growing and the most dynamic economies in Europe also happen to be the Eastern Central economies. They are young, they just came out of the Russian side, they just discovered free market, they just got into EU, they got a lot of infrastructure money coming in from EU, and they just really want to become an industrial powerhouse just like Western and Central. And that's what the idea of this 3 Seas connection was, that hey, all the infrastructure in Europe goes east-west, let's do some north-south connection between the Baltic and the Adriatic and the Black Sea. So this 3 Seas concept is that, and now it is even more propelled with the NATO doctrine of forward posturing, that we need to get NATO troops, security ideas up on the front, and that we need to have better infrastructure to move up and down from all the way the Baltic and the Finland down to Romania. So there's a convergence of security and economic need for security and economic corridors and connectivity in the Eastern and Central Europe. And these corridors, again, have to link up with Adriatic, and again, back to inclusivity. Don't get hooked up on small. Inclusive in Indo-Mediterranean, and inclusive again on the 3 Seas and Adriatic. And Italy did a mistake not joining 3 Seas. Greece just joined it because they had their own little plan earlier on Central European stuff, and they said when 3 Seas come in, hey, we've been doing this game before, so why should we jump on it? They ought to jump on it like yesterday, because there is no thing happening Adriatic without Italy playing a ball. And Adriatic is the most important commercial port of Black Sea or even Baltic to some degree. So back to inclusivity. Now number 3 point on inclusive. When we say Adriatic, we do mean that Trieste plays an important role, but not just Trieste. We should look at in a broader way of the ports of Trieste, but also sister ports in Slovenia and northern Croatia. Because if we want to go into container traffic, not just oil, then we would need the rail networks of all these 3 ports to meet the capacity we want to do. We can't just do it from Trieste. And we make it into a partnership European project as opposed to a national one. So back to the idea of inclusive. When you say Trieste, it's like IMAC, it refers to the northern Adriatic, not just one particular city. That's point number 3, back to the inclusive part. Now, when we talk about Trieste, I just happened to be there. Lovely town, actually. Charming little place. Easy to fall in love with. So, if you talk about Trieste in particular, there is the strength of Trieste, and as a good friend ever said, our strengths are our weaknesses. The strength of Trieste, that it is a European, not a national port. That is truly a port that serves the entire, as good friend said it, the old Austria-Hungarian Empire, and everything from Munich, Zurich, Vienna, all over the Budapest. That's why the Hungarians are very keen in investing in it. But because it's a European port and not a national one, it may not get as much love and affection as other national ports within Italy. I mean, Genoa is more important as a national port to Italy than Trieste is. And that is an important point to keep in mind. Because I'm looking directly, where's the lady from Trieste? Right there, yes. I'm looking, so it's an important point for Trieste in there. Because the competitive advantage for Trieste is that it is a European project. The political disadvantage is that it's a European project. You don't have anybody nationally championing for it. What is happening is that Marseille is an outstanding national French port. Barcelona is an outstanding national Spanish port. Genoa is an outstanding national Italian port. Piraeus is an outstanding national Greek port. Ain't none of them as interesting and as relevant as a European port as Trieste is. But it's an orphan. Needs daddy. Actually needs a mother. I'll leave that later. Anyway, so Trieste is an important element. That's why I said the opportunity comes knocking, and you have to then figure out where somebody is going to take this particular element of Trieste. Now, in this whole issue, you can just imagine now how relevant and how important Italy can become. It is, for all the reasons that Talo and Senator Terzi talked about, that the Mediterranean, if Mediterranean Ocean is that important, the middle connecting 3 continents, then Italy truly is the most indispensable nation within the Mediterranean, making the link to India, making and strengthening the link with the Baltic and the Black Sea. And the point to do that is the Northern Adriatic. Now, so this is where politics and economics come together. We can spend a lot of time talking about Piraeus and talk a lot of time talking about the 3 countries, but they don't have the economic fundamentals of Trieste, any one of them. But what they do have is political fundamentals. So we figure out how the politics and economics of this particular exercise is going to meet. But I'll end there. Yes, spoken enough about it. And I'll speak it just like, and it's always interesting to go with my good friend Jim Carafano. It's like we've been doing this road show, so now whoever ends up going first talks about it the same, steals the lines, and another person has to make up stuff to sound something different. From American perspective, linking free and open spaces are important. And I think Italy now has the role to play not only to become a leader within Europe, a leader within transatlantic relationship, a leader with not only Africa, but also in the Indo-Pacific region. And the secret to this thing, and I'll end by just thanking Vas for doing this, especially doing it on a Sunday afternoon, and a heck of a crowd for Sunday afternoon. I think it completely privileged to be having the same podium with as esteemed diplomats and knowledgeable people as Ambassador Talo and Senator Terzi. But the start of this Indo-Mediterranean dialogue is only a most modest one, not because of what we are doing today, but because of what it will become in next 5 or 10 or even 2 years. And I will end again by saying this. If you want to make and grasp this opportunity that's knocking on the door, then before the end of this dang year, there ought to be an event just like Jim said, in Trieste, where Prime Minister Meloni and the President of the European Commission needs to come and talk about what is the vision, the practical and the political vision for Europe to be connecting to Indo-Pacific and Mid-Atlantic. Now, as Americans, we just come here and we listen up to hear elite intellectual people talking about the relevancy of dang Europe in a world where the focus has gone to Indo-Pacific. Well, here's the opportunity for the relevancy of Europe. The question is if he's going to grasp it or not. I hope it does. Thanks a lot.
Kaush, thank you very much. The timing of doing this on a Sunday afternoon, on a summer Sunday afternoon in Rome, is to know how many people were really committed, and we have a lot of committed people here. So that is already good news for this initiative. Before we break for coffee, I would like to invite Dr. Rajiv Singh to thank our panelists by giving them a small token of thanks on our behalf. Dr. Singh.